Hello everybody. In this Python tutorial we're going to go over a few different ways that you can filter your Pandas data frames. We have a whole bunch of examples to get through, so let's jump right in. In our first example we created a data frame here. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. So we have 3 columns titled air, land, and water, and we have some named rows 1 through 4. For each of the columns we have animals that can fly, and then we have land animals and water animals. For our first example here, what we want to do is we want to look at axis 0. So axis 0 references the rows and axis 1 references the columns. And then we want to reference row 3 and just pull out or filter the data pertaining to row 3. Now before we move on, let's take a quick look at this filter function. Let's go over here and type dataframe.filter ? And you can see we get some information and some examples and all that good stuff. But one thing to note is that the filter does not filter a data frame on its contents. It filters based on the labels of your indexes, so the labels of your column headers and rows. Let's just go ahead and clear that. Let's put in our filter1 variable again. And as we said, we're looking at rows. Which row? Row 3. And row 3, here is all of the pertaining data. Let's go ahead and pull that data frame up again, just so we have a good visual reference point. For our next example, using the filter again, we're going to use a regular expression. So for this one, let's go ahead and use axis 1. So we'll look at the columns, and we want to pull out anything using this regular expression, which means anything that ends with an R. So that should be air and water. Let's put in filter 2, and we get what we expected. Another way to use filter is to use the like argument, and basically this looks at anything that contains what you assign. So for this one, axis 0, we'll look at the rows, and we want to pull out anything that has a double E. So that should be this data here. Filter 3, and that's what we get. Okay, good. Moving on, let's go over some examples of how you can filter using Booleans. So we have created another data frame here with Great Lakes data. Let's take a look at it. So we have the lake name, the lake depth, and the surface area for each lake. Now, the first thing you can do is use Loke. So we go ahead and we use our data frame name, then we use Loke, and then this here references the data frame column header for depth. Now here we go ahead and put in our condition. So for the Great Lakes data frame column maximum depth, we want anything less than 500. So that should just be Lake Superior and its data. Let's put in our variable and take a look at the output. And we get Superior and its corresponding data. Here we have another example which is very similar to our previous example. However, in this case, we didn't use Loke. Now what we've done here is we have referenced our data frame name, and then inside the square brackets, we've gone ahead and referenced the column surface area. Now for the condition, we want to return anything that is greater than or equal to 22,000 for the surface area. So let's take a look at that. And you can see in our original data frame, any of the Great Lakes that have a surface area of greater than 22,000 includes Superior, Huron, and Michigan, and that's what we get. Next up, let's go over an example where we want to filter using and or. So you might be used to typing out and or with the actual words. However, in this case, we're going to use symbols. So for and, you can use the ampersand, and for or, you can use the pipe. So similar to our example here, where we reference our data frame, and then we reference our column, and then we put in our condition, you can do the same thing here, and then join those with and or. However, note that you want to go ahead and put in round brackets for each reference and its condition. So we put in round brackets here and here. Then we put in our and then we put in the round brackets here and here. And what we want to do is look at maximum depth and return anything less than 1,000 and anything greater than 700. So let's look at our table for the depth. Anything less than 1,000 and greater than 700 includes Huron, Michigan, Erie. So let's go ahead and take a look and make sure we get what we expected. And we do. Huron, Michigan, Erie. Here we have another example. However, in this case, we're going to use or. Again, we're looking at maximum depth, and we want anything greater than 2,000 or anything greater than 1,000. Now, since there's nothing greater than 2,000, it's just going to go ahead and return anything greater than 1,000, and the only thing that fits that criteria is Lake Ontario, and that's what we get. Now, what if you wanted to filter by multiple criteria? We've gone ahead and created a new data frame. Let's go ahead and take a look. So we have some big cats, and then we have the region where these cats typically live, and then we have approximate weights for these cats. And then we just have some generic row labels to label each cat with a number, cat 1, 2, 3. Now, for our first criteria, what we want to do is just pull out the tigers. So we can reference our data frame, then we can reference the column header, big cats, and then we're going to use a map and a lambda function, and we want this lambda function to help us pull out only the tigers. So you can see that there are 2 types of tigers and 1 lion. Now let's go ahead and select this and run it and display our output so far. So it pulled out only the tigers, the Bengal tiger and the Siberian tiger. Now we want to add a second criteria to this. So we want to only pull out tigers, but then we want only the tigers that weigh more than 500 pounds. So we have created that criteria here. Again, we use our data frame name. Then inside the square brackets, we put our first criteria that we created here. Then we use our and we put in a second criteria in round brackets. So for that, we use the same basic syntax, data frame, square brackets, column header, and condition of greater than 500 pounds for the weight. So if we put in tiger 2, let's try that again, tiger 2, now we get the only data that pertains to our criteria, which was it must be a tiger and it must weigh more than 500 pounds. And the only data that fits that criteria is the Siberian tiger. Okay, so we have 2 more examples, is in and query. For the first example, what we want to do is look at column A and pull out all of the data that corresponds to the data values 1 and 5. So let's go ahead and take a look at our data frame. So here's column A, and this is in example will return this data because we've put in 1, and this data because we put in 5. So let's go ahead and take a look. And you can see we get back what we expected. Now again, just real quick, we use our data frame name, and then in the square brackets, we reference data frame column A, and then we reference the values in column A, and we want to return all of the data pertaining to values 1 and 5 in column A. Okay, moving on to query, and query can do all kinds of cool things, but we're just going to show you a real quick example. So what we want to do here is look in column A and return all of the data pertaining to the values 2 and 4. Okay, so that would be all of the data pertaining to the evens. So that would be this data, B2, 20, 200, and this data, D4, 40, 400. So let's put in evens. And we get back the data that pertains to the evens in column A. We're good to go. Okay, so that's all we have for this Python Pandas tutorial on a few different ways that you can filter or pull out filtered information from your data frames. We will be doing many more Python tutorials in the near future. Join us for those, and we'll see you next time.